Oh, this one was an absolute pleasure to indulge in. I mean, it's a devastating film in many ways, but it is such a phenomenal artistic success, I feel daunted and overwhelmed. This title is 1983's Utopia, directed by Sohrab Shahid-Saless. Saless is one of the great directors of world cinema, in my opinion. Born in 1944, he directed his first 3 films in Iran, from 1973 to 1975. In 1976, he emigrated to West Germany, continuing his budding career. From 1976 to 1992, he released 12 features, before passing away in 1998. I have had the privilege of viewing most of Saless's feature filmography, with, I believe, 3 exceptions, and I would have to nominate my favourite as being, perhaps, Utopia. Utopia concerns a pimp, Heinz, and his 5 prostitutes, Renate, Rosie, Susie, Helga, and Monica. The 3-hour runtime predominantly focuses on the miserable monotony of their existence, worth and value reduced to a potent nothingness. Subtextually, we may be viewing a Marxian critique of the sex worker industry, but I couldn't say for certain. I mean, the way Heinz manipulates his 5 ladies against each other through deception and lies, ensuring that they cannot collectively stand up against him, it inspired the thought in me. Perhaps it is more an allegory for the wider theory of alienation as applied to any system of commodities. In this case, it is sexual intercourse reduced to a purchased service. Saless seems to identify sex as an encapsulation of human dignity, and the selling of sex as dignity's demise. Sex could be considered the extreme end of a spectrum, entailing all commoditized human services, the employ of human labor for monetary gain. But these are only thoughts. None of this is definitive. I have no interview with Saless to corroborate any of my speculations. I would never assume this film to be a condemnation of prostitution, so much as using it as an avenue for transporting a thematic freight. Mainly because, of course, some strands of feminist thought no longer consider sex work to be inherently exploitative or undignifying, which is more or less the only reason I would assume this film to not necessarily be a critique of prostitution. Maybe Saless belonged to this camp. Who knows? We cannot assume anything of anyone with certainty without clear statement or evidence of action, except maybe prejudice, some today might insist. So there is the film narratively and thematically, but now I would like to spend a short time on its subdued aesthetics. This is a mostly minimal picture. Predominantly its narrative takes place within the same building, the camera only ever tracks its players, and against grey decaying wallpaper at that. Characters are depicted as pale silhouettes among sickened interiors, until occasionally the camera zooms into their faces, seeking to pry, transparently and very successfully, the suppressed emotional anguish of its players' veiled pathologies. But yes, this film relentlessly wrenches a fierce sympathy. Utopia is extremely emotionally affecting to an engaged consumer, and yet is served with rigid indifference. I consider this to be amongst the greatest films of the 1980s, and, if I may pontificate, one of the greatest pictures ever made. Saless has composed countless great films, though this one may be his finest, in my opinion. It recognizes the legacy of Fassbinder drama, yet still decides to strip, then dissect. Aesthetically, it is restrained, almost performing as pure function, and dramatically it is far more decidedly unromantic than anything I recall in even Fassbinder. Some might dispute this, especially as I would suggest that there is something fundamentally romantic about most, if not all, of Fassbinder's films, which is to say, something in every picture is being partially romanticized, be it youth, liberty, sex, community, or identity. That is far more than I can say about Saless's Utopia, however. One cannot truly imagine Fassbinder crafting this precise film, and more importantly, one can imagine how the Fassbinder-helmed Utopia may have looked, or at least felt, impassioned. Yes, it is probably a certain dispassion, which only someone like Saless could have brought into this project, whereas it is only too easy to envisage Fassbinder's Utopia as taking a notably political stance or sharing some sort of belief of some kind, any kind, rather than wallowing in sheer human misery and emptiness. Well, if this seems like a pleasant viewing experience for you, then go find a copy of Sohrab Shahid-Saless's Utopia. Certainly, this would be one of the 5 best films yet discussed in this program. If not the best, I may go so far.